Bond. James Bond.
James Bond has an interesting relationship with fandom. Spanning nearly 60 years and dipping its toe into a seventh decade, the ultimate spy's legacy is largely incidental. If you're a Bond fan, it can depend on where you were born, which Bond was the first one you saw in theaters, which Bond was your dad's favorite, and who knows what else. The result is a filmography that's pretty fragmented, with 6 different actors traversing several different eras, so depending on which Bond fan you ask, the question of how should I watch the Bond movies elicits very different answers. My personal favorite answer is, you should watch all the Bond movies in chronological order as if he were really one guy the whole time.
Shaken, not stirred.
007 made his bones over the years through largely standalone adventures. Daniel Craig's Bond is the only one that's had a legitimately continuous story, save for the back-to-back appearances of Jaws in Roger Moore's tenure. But what if you, like me, wanted to assume that all 24 movies and all 6 of the actors played the same guy start to finish? What viewing order could possibly accomplish that? How could all the recastings and side characters and villainous plot threads be kept coherent? I'm glad you asked, friend, because here follows all the fanfic, logic leaps, and general delusions you'll need to entertain to watch the entire Bond franchise in quote-unquote chronological order. Casino Royale offers the only true origin story of Her Majesty's secret agent, so we have to start here. James Bond receives his 00 status from Judi Dench's M after a grainy black and white cold open. Then he celebrates by shooting up an embassy. Classic James. After a trip to the Bahamas and the most exciting night of poker ever, we get to the end of the film where, for the first time ever, he utters his signature line.
The name's Bond. James Bond.
And we hear the Bond theme, for the purposes of this chronology, for the first time ever. Quantum of Solace picks up something like 20 minutes after the end of Casino Royale. The enigmatic Mr. White is still in Bond's trunk, and the bitter aftertaste of his heartbreak at the hands of Vesper Lynd is still lingering. Happily, a trip down to Bolivia to thwart Dominic Green's honestly ahead-of-its-time plot about controlling an entire country's water supply is just the diversion he needs until he finds closure. He wraps up Quantum of Solace as a hardened agent of MI6, ready to work alongside Judi Dench's M once more. But we can't go to Craig's next film because in Skyfall we get this.
You know the rules of the game. You've been playing it long enough.
Which doesn't make that much sense because he just became 007 like 3 weeks ago. So when did he turn into an old dog?
Old dog, new tricks.
After Quantum of Solace, we start to see him turn into an old dog with the third stop in our chronology, Goldfinger. Sean Connery is Bond at his coldest, and while Goldfinger doesn't set up all the things that would make Bond so famous, it does set up the all-important formula. An outlandish villain with an equally outlandish plot and a still more outlandish henchman. But what about M? Here we find Bernard Lee as the man atop MI6 in Judi Dench's place. Let's say this is because Judi Dench's M has been called away to head up Station H for a time, and Bernard Lee is the new M in her stead, bringing with him the ever-faithful Ms. Moneypenny played by Lois Maxwell.
Oh, the only gold I know about is the kind you wear. You know, on the third finger of your left hand.
In Bond's following 3 adventures, he begins to encounter what will become his chief rival, Ernst Stavro Blofeld, and the special executive for counterintelligence, terrorism, revenge, and extortion, or Spectre if you don't want to just revel in that acronym.
For your sake, I hope so.
In Dr. No, Bond thwarts a plan to thwart a space launch, an operation bankrolled by Spectre. From Russia with Love is a revenge plot devised by Spectre to get back at Bond himself. And a footnote here, these movies have to be screened back-to-back in this order specifically because of Bond's London-based love interest who appears in both films, who, in addition to having just the worst name, is actually responsible for Bond's catchphrase.
Trench. Sylvia Trench.
Bond. James Bond.
But not in this chronology. James has said that loads of times before. Thunderball is next because it's another encounter with Spectre, but not with Blofeld. It's important that they've not met face-to-face yet, but by very slowly stopping the underwater theft of some nukes in the Bahamas, Bond is proving to be quite a thorn in his side. So much so that Blofeld, who prides himself on operating under the radar, decides to take a break from executing counterintelligence, terrorism, revenge, and extortion in order to regroup and strike at him later. In reality, a long legal battle kept the franchise from being able to use Spectre or the character Ernst Stavro Blofeld until the most recent film.
You're a hard man to kill, Blofeld.
Resulting in a long stretch of Bond films without his arch-rival. That same stretch of films, however, used most of the same supporting cast, so in this chronology, I'm happy to fanfiction my way into an excuse for Blofeld's absence by moving on to Roger Moore. With Spectre laying low, Bond also has a chance to relax a little bit in a smoother, Roger Moore-flavored package. He's forced Spectre into hiding, so much so that he legally can't even mention them. But he is allowed to go about the day-to-day business of taking cases as they come. And after his Jamaican adventure in Live and Let Die, Bond must next take on Christopher Lee's excellent Francisco Scaramanga in The Man with the Golden Gun, and then go to space to stop Hugo Drax in Moonraker. The important thing here is that Bernard Lee is still M, Lois Maxwell is still Moneypenny, and Desmond Llewellyn is still Q. So that means we're dipping back into the Connery era while that cast is still holding down the fort at MI6. The high-profile nature of going to space and saving the world a few times plays havoc with the secret agent's ability to do their job. So, step one is to fake your own death.
Well, now that you're dead, perhaps some of your old friends will pay a little less attention to you for a while.
So the next movie up is You Only Live Twice. Bond finds his way to Japan where he pretends to take a wife while hiding out in a fishing village, then to a super iconic volcano lair and an enormous Austin Powers-inspiring showdown with his old pal Blofeld, who's decided he's done laying low.
Goodbye, Mr. Bond.
Even though James gets the better of him here, Blofeld comes right back in Diamonds Are Forever. If we're looking at the dynamic between Bond and Blofeld as a sort of Batman-Joker through line to this entire experiment, this movie begins to show the cracks in Blofeld's psyche. It's, frankly, a little bananas. He creates doubles of himself and changes his appearance.
Double jeopardy, Mr. Bond.
Blofeld in the film is played by Charles Gray, who, in the previous entry on this watch list, played a different character, a contact of Bond's in Tokyo named Henderson. So this means that Blofeld made himself look like Bond's old ally, which is a dastardly move indeed. But in addition to Blofeld mimicking his old pals, Bond might be starting to run into a lady problem. Perhaps getting fake married in You Only Live Twice has him eager to try out the real thing. Enter Contessa Teresa Tracy de Vincenzo, daughter of a European crime boss. A chance meeting on the beach leads to romance, which in turn accidentally leads to Blofeld. James finds himself face to face with Telly Savalas in a Swiss allergy institute while also surrounded by beautiful women from around the world. On Her Majesty's Secret Service is all Spectre and Blofeld all the time, with Bond discovering a plot to brainwash the women into spreading weaponized bacteria to their home countries, which fits with the crazy schemes Blofeld is resorting to these days. By the end of the movie, Bond has defeated Blofeld once again and has even married Tracy. As the newlyweds motor off to their honeymoon, Blofeld and his right-hand woman, Irma Bunt, murder Tracy in an Alpine drive-by, and George Lazenby's only outing as Bond sees the character's first real tragedy since Vesper's death in Venice. So, here comes a hard cut to Tracy's grave, and a less whimsical Roger Moore than when we last saw him having sex in orbit. For Your Eyes Only was, in real life, a more grounded course correction from the bonkers Moonraker, which was itself a reaction to the success of Star Wars. But in this chronologically perfect watch order, the film is, in addition to the graveside visit, a perfect follow-up to On Her Majesty's Secret Service. Firstly, he immediately gets to kill Blofeld. Kind of. And if you're wondering why the film never says his name out loud or even shows his face, it's because the lawsuit keeping the franchise from actually using Blofeld was still in effect. So maybe in our version of events, this actually isn't Blofeld. But this dialed-back outing for Bond matches the mood of a recently widowed man. He's older, a little slower, and not quite the womanizer he's been to date. In short, this is as close to mourning as we get with 007. This is also an M-less Bond movie, as Bernard Lee passed away before he could shoot his scenes for the film, and they opted to rewrite the movie instead of recasting in a hurry. Of course, in our chronology, we don't know that, so The Spy Who Loved Me is the final Roger Moore film to feature both Bernard Lee as M, so in essence he's still in charge in spite of not appearing in the previous film, and a mention of his dead wife.
Many lady friends, but married only once. Wife killed.
All right, you've made your point.
But also, Bond seems to have more distance from Tracy's death, as The Spy Who Loved Me is pre-Moonraker peak Roger Moore charm, from the Union Jack parachute to the perfectly timed cork pop. There's also zero Spectre and Blofeld, although apparently they tried initially to incorporate him as the villain, but yet another injunction forced them, in the real world, toward Carl Stromberg's oceanic-obsessed bad guy.
Now you will pay the penalty.
The film also briefly introduces an Admiral Hargraves, played by Robert Brown, who is clearly in line for a promotion. But wrapping up The Spy Who Loved Me with yet another tryst with a spy has to have taken its toll on the man. So next we move into Timothy Dalton's run. The Living Daylights and License to Kill features a return to the colder side of Bond with just a dash of Roger Moore's empathy left over. Meanwhile, Desmond Llewellyn is still trusty old Q, but Robert Brown got that promotion and is the new M for these two films, who brings with him Caroline Bliss as his Moneypenny. By the way, I think this also indicates that Moneypenny is a code name just like M or Q. But, real-world note here, these films were also made in the 80s at the height of the AIDS crisis. Bond's sex life was very intentionally kept to an absolute minimum. It's also clear the world is changing, and the powers that be have decided to bring Judi Dench's M back from Station H to shepherd in the new era. Pierce Brosnan's tenure as Bond runs the gamut from legit good with GoldenEye to tsunami surfing bad with Die Another Day, although fans of Bond's campier moments will say that film has actually aged quite well. But in terms of watching the franchise in chronological order as though he's one guy the whole time, they all occupy the same space. GoldenEye definitely comes first as it establishes a new order of business with Judi Dench's M as well as Samantha Bond as Dame Judy's personal Moneypenny. It should also be pointed out that Desmond Llewellyn's Q makes his final appearance in The World Is Not Enough, passing the torch briefly to John Cleese, who, in spite of his best efforts, was never really going to work out. Which brings us all the way back to Daniel Craig. Like I said 19 movies ago, it was always silly how Bond was a brand new 00 in the first two movies, then a grizzled vet old dog who can't learn new tricks in the third film. But watching it this way, oh boy does this put some miles on the guy. He's squared off with supervillains, saved the world countless times, been married, widowed, and mourned. No wonder he's playing drinking games with scorpions as part of his retirement plan. But the resurfacing of Javier Bardem's Silva to seek vengeance for M's now fairly recent transgressions in Station H coaxes Bond back to MI6, where he meets John Cleese's young replacement, Ben Whishaw's Q, who, after years of dealing with aged Desmond Llewellyn, comes as a bitter pill to swallow for our old dog James. The battle against Silva takes James all the way back to his ancestral home and ultimately leads to the death of Dench's M and her replacement, Ralph Fiennes. And oh look, all of a sudden Eve's name is Moneypenny.
Eve Moneypenny.
Cause seriously, it's a codename in this universe. But Bond is ready to get back to work, right? And back to work he gets, but still taking orders from his old M. He dives into the resurgence of the shadowy group that he thought he took down way back in Quantum of Solace, but it's not just a revival of Quantum, but a revival of Spectre. And sitting at the head of the table is his dear old adopted brother, Franz Oberhauser. Now, say what you will about Spectre as a movie, but whether you liked it or not, there's a way to watch this movie that makes it better. According to the film, Franz, who hated James because their father loved him more despite being adopted, rose through the world of organized crime to create Spectre, all in the interest of ruining James's life, and he pulled the name Ernst Stavro Blofeld from his mother's side of the family. But the problem with that is, the name is meaningless to James. Star Trek Into Darkness made the same mistake with Khan. In this perfect chronology, however, Franz hates his adopted brother so much that he renames his criminal empire and even changes his own name to something that specifically digs deeper, more intimately into his brother's psyche, with the revelation that Bond had fallen into Blofeld's orbit as a child. The man that took him in as an orphan, Hans Oberhauser, was in fact married to the Blofelds. How crushing is that? But also, like Casino Royale's unique origin story, Spectre is the only film that offers what could be a bit of finality to his story. He literally drives off into the sunset with Madeline Swan. But wait, the astute viewer is asking, 14 minutes into this video. Pretty sure you left out a couple Roger Moore films. And to that I say, of course I did, because it's time to watch them now. Roger Moore's final 2 turns as 007 are, in all honesty, some of my favorites. The campiness is so much fun to revisit, in part because of the killer theme in A View to a Kill, but mostly because of how old Bond looks. Like, Roger Moore in his 50s old. So, what if, after driving off into retirement with Madeline Swan, Bond gets that itch again, to go out into the world and save it from those who would twirl their mustaches? The man has spent his entire life saving the world, only now to be asked to settle down. Sure, retirement was his idea, but expecting him to behave after the shit he's done and seen, it's even enough for him to go so mad for the old days, he imagines previous M's and Q's and money pennies on his way out the door for what amounts to an unstable, flashback-riddled, almost 60-year-old former spy embarking on unsanctioned missions. Imagine old man Roger Moore, and if you want to, here's a way Connery's off-brand Never Say Never Again would fit in as well, doing all of this while he's got Madeline Swan waiting for him at home. What lies is he telling her? What business trips does he say he's going on? Well, at some point, that all catches up with him and Madeline bolts, leaving him alone in retirement in Jamaica with, according to the trailer for No Time to Die, a bad knee. And hopefully No Time to Die isn't just a big remake of Dr. No, because that might make me rethink this whole thing. Also, if you're interested, the 1967 psychedelic Nobody Behind the Wheel adaptation of Casino Royale would fit perfectly here at the end, with David Niven's retired James Bond being the continuation of the character, but honestly, you don't really have to watch that. But in the meantime, you've got half a century's worth of super spy adventure to watch with a very specific set of instructions to keep in mind at all times.
away.
Hello and welcome to Watch from Home Theater. I'm Clint Gage. Happy holidays, everybody. I won't lie, I am silly excited for the show we got lined up today. We will be watching GoldenEye with some very special guests. But before we get to them, need to let you know YouTube has been streaming all the Bond movies for free in December. There's a link to watch GoldenEye in the description below. So you can open that up in a new tab and get it all queued up. It's also on Hulu and Netflix. There are links in the description for them as well. Or God forbid you get your physical media out, get your Blu-ray copies warmed up of GoldenEye. That'll work too. Either way, we'll give you guys a few minutes to get all that squared away, get your movies queued up.
What I'm supposed
downloading
to do
a bunch of little shows.
this, would you remind me what I'm supposed to do to get this screen to the right? Yeah. I'm on top of somebody else.
We're good now, darling. Are you good now? Yeah.
Okay. Are we back in?
Clint, can you hear me?
I can hear you, Martin. Yeah, how's it going? It's Martin Campbell. In the meantime, while we get some of the rest of this sorted out, Martin, how you doing? Thanks for being here.
I'm great. 25 years. Can you believe it? You know, of course, I've only aged about 3 since that time. So
sure,
but no, it's terrific to be here.
And congratulations on only aging 3 years in the past 25. It's something we've all been striving to do.
And of course, as you can see with Famke, he's actually got younger, so there you have
it. You guys got the secret.
When you get 25 years,
I know, darling. Can you believe it? Jesus. Okay.
Well, either way, I feel like all 4 of us are here now, which is exciting for me. So guys, I welcome and thank you again for being here. My first question is, one of the things that I find so interesting about the Bond franchise. Am I?
Oh, where's Coco? Quick,
man.
Sorry, Daniel, you're going to have to just stand.
Is it me again?
Oh, we're back again.
Can you hear?
Can you hear me, Clint?
I can hear you guys. Yeah. Is it? Am I back? Am I having bad connection?
No, we don't know who's having bad connections at the moment. So look,
who knows? Well, either way, welcome to the show where we all have bad connections. The question that I wanted to ask, so I can stop talking with my bad connection and get to you guys, is the Bond franchise has been around for so long that everybody kind of has their own unique way into it, like how they were introduced to Bond. If it was the first one you saw in the theater, or if it was your parents' favorite Bond, whatever it was. So I want to ask you guys, and Famke, we'll start with you. What was your introduction to the Bond franchise?
Well, I grew up in the Netherlands, outside of Amsterdam, and my father was obsessed with James Bond. But we relied on whatever was on television, and we could get our 2 or 3 Dutch channels, and then we could get the BBC, and but the reruns of so my early memories are really reruns of the Sean Connery and Roger Moore. Mostly Sean Connery ones because my dad just loved him. So, and then when we were old enough, we could go to the theater to watch them, but we just, that's how I was introduced.
Yeah, that's similar to mine. Mine was always the 12 Days of 007, I think, on TBS or TNT, one of the cable channels here in the States. Every Christmas would just play the Bond movies in no particular order. So they were just on kind of randomly every December. But so I get them all. They all kind of blur together. Some of the older ones, which is a lot of fun. But Martin, what about you?
I can't hear.
We lost his audio.
We can't hear you.
we got his tech support flying in. There we go.
Can you? Yeah, my tech support is my sister-in-law is sitting next to me to leap up and sort this out. Anyway, so in '62, I took her to see Dr. No, and she was an avid reader of the books. And as you probably know, the reason they became famous was President Kennedy actually put on, I think, his 10 best reader lists. And that's how the whole series became such a huge success, certainly the books. What also people don't know, of course, I think there are only 7 novels written. and some short stories. Quantum of Solace, for example, that title was from one of his short stories, as was Octopussy, I think, was another one that was taken from his short stories, even though the stories themselves were obviously very different to what the short story was about when they were scripted. So I did that, and obviously, as Famke said, Sean Connery, of course, was Bond. We all loved him, and I've been every Bond film since, of course.
That's great. Brian, what about you?
I think kind of a mix of seeing them on TV, but also we would get like these random VHS box sets for Christmas, or a family member would get them. And it was never the whole, it wasn't all the movies. It would just be this kind of smattering of 7 or 8 different films put together in a big box, and you'd put them on and you'd be like, is this supposed to be the same character aging through time? Like, it took me a while to realize that they weren't sort of like canonically in the right order, but that it was focusing on one character going through different adventures throughout different periods of time. And I just fell in love with them. I was like, this is such a pulpy, fun, like awesome spy thriller series. The idea of telling the story from this perspective that centers around like really cool, almost science fiction tech, but also just awesome action scenes and, really, really fun love interests and villains. It just culminated in this idea that like, this is one of the most interesting and impressive cinematic and film franchises ever made in terms of creativity and longevity and so many other reasons. It's just, it's kind of unmatched, there's really nothing else like it.
No, it's completely unmatched. It's 58 years, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's crazy.
Yeah, I mean, when No Time to Die comes out, it'll be in the 7th decade, which is insane.
Oh boy,
what an achievement!
Yeah. But before we talk too much more about like how much time has passed since we all started watching Bond movies, let's get into it. Let's watch GoldenEye. So everybody, get your copies of GoldenEye queued up wherever you're deciding to watch it. Oh, here we go. We're paused right here on the lion roaring of the MGM. Make sure also to know if you're not quite synced up throughout the movie, we will have our time code playing along the on screen here, so you can catch right up with us. So get it queued up there right before the lion roars. And don't forget to leave your comments and questions for Famke and Martin in the chat of wherever you guys are watching, and we'll try to get to see if we can't get to some of those during the show. But here we go. Let's click play. That's enough business out of me. 3, 2, 1, play. So I think that the combination of the MGM and United Artists logo for me was always like, in the way that I used to think the 20th Century Fox logo was the intro to Star Wars, like the MGM and United Artists logo is the beginning of a James Bond movie.
Yes.
So I guess the interesting thing about underneath this entire movie is that this is Pierce Brosnan's first go, right? This is we're rebooting, or not necessarily rebooting, but restarting with a new Bond. And so even
After
things like that, yeah. And so even things like that opening gun barrel sequence.
Yeah, it was legal reasons.
It was legal reasons that they hadn't had a Bond.
Yeah, there was a guy called Ferretti who was running MGM, and he was a crook. And basically, the legal machinations were so terrible, it was illegal to make a Bond film. It was literally locked up in litigation. And this was the first film that they could, the first film they could make after that was resolved. Now, this here is what's interesting about this is that dam is almost vertical. And of course, most dams slope out at the bottom. And obviously, if someone takes this jump, which was about 800 feet or whatever, they're going to hit the concrete. But this is in Switzerland, and he did the jump, and he did one take. This was it. And what's so fantastic, if you look at it, we have them, they're all real, no digital, no wire removal, nothing, all for real. Now we go to the wide shot. Now look at the close-up. See where he pulls the gun. Watch him pull the gun. It's fantastic.
Oh my God.
He pulls it, he points it, watch this, and he disappears behind the rock.
just in time to.
Yeah, I mean, and that was one take, and there was a hilarious moment just before, as that countdown happened, 10, 9, 8, 7, 6 for him to jump. He glanced round, and the guy operating the crane just crossed himself, hoping he wasn't going to kill himself. And he had to jump.
So
it was
a really got it in one take.
Really amazing.
And I always felt the idea of putting Bond upside down in a toilet for the introduction to Pierce Brosnan was a really great way to introduce the new Bond.
Was your perverse New Zealand sense of humor?
Oh, come on. That's exactly, there you have it.
Yeah, I wanted to ask: was there a conversation about this? Like, how much selling did you have to do to get to introduce the new Bond upside down in the can?
Believe it or not, I had no objection at all from the producers, who, by the way, are terrific. Barbara and Michael, great producers, and at no point did they complain about it. I thought they might, but they didn't. All this is at Leeds and Studios, which is now Warner Brothers, where they made Harry Potter, and in London, just north of London. This is all sets, of course, that were built there. Peter Lamont, the production designer, who tragically has just died in the last week, I think, but he was Ken Adams' art director. Ken Adam, is the production designer on all the early Bonds. Fantastic design. He also did Strangelove, of course, and other famous films as well. And of course, we have Sean Bean there as 006.
I do want to ask about because the cold open action sequence is part of the Bond formula at this point. I think it's got to be a good one, and especially with the first time out for Pierce. Was there any sort of pressure to kind of out Bond all the other Bonds with this opening sequence?
No, it's not that so much, but you do sit down and talk about what can we do that's never been done before. I think the greatest opening Bond sequence is that guy skiing off the, I think it's The Spy Who Loved Me, where he skis off the mountain all in one shot. I think is the most fantastic. So in a funny way, we had that in mind when we did this. But the idea is you always go for something that the audience has never seen before. We sit down, we discuss it. And I'd seen photographs, I'd seen documentary on this dam actually, because climbers use it to hone their skills for mountain climbing. So that's really where the idea came from.
So the stuntman never even did a rehearsal. The first time he jumped was the first
time. No. He said, he said, I'll do it once. He said, and it was 800 feet, I think, the drop. Wow, hell of a drop.
I'd also read that the dam started after the film. The dam had started to lease space out to a bungee jumping company so that tourists could come and do that jump.
Probably true. Yeah.
Oh wow.
Now
that's terrifying.
So here
fun.
Yeah, the option's there if you want.
And of course, Gottfried John plays the general here. He's a German actor. Excellent actor, slightly eccentric but really good. So he played the Aren't I think is his name. There we go. So there's Bond doing ridiculous things. He sees they come pouring down. He shoots everybody. Pierce looking great, of course.
I know. Looks fantastic.
Now the censors, I wasn't allowed.
I was going to ask, when was the last time you guys have seen GoldenEye?
A couple of years.
Well, we did a tour at the time when the movie came out, because nobody can promote a film like the Bond producers can. So we went all over the world and saw the movie so many times that I OD'd on it and I couldn't see it again after. What about you, Marty? When was the last time you saw it? Last night?
No, a couple of years ago, something like that.
Last night.
Last night? Are you kidding me? Oh, God. Anyway, here he is.
I became obsessed with playing the game with my friends and the GoldenEye video game for the Nintendo 64. And that came out a couple years after the movie because it notoriously took them a while to adapt it. And so I went back and we ended up renting this movie and eventually buying it on DVD, and we would just watch it together dozens and dozens of times. Because every scene in this film became, a level in the game. So we almost had everything memorized inside and out.
Yeah. So here we are. There's our general.
I do love this little beat in this action scene, in what is on either end of this action sequence, a pretty fast-paced, tense scene, and then there's this extended, quiet, squeaky kind of tiptoeing across the room,
wheel
right here in the middle.
I remember telling the sound guys to give it a squeaky wheel.
It goes a long way. It really does.
Yeah. Now this is all on the runway of the airfield where Leavesden is based. This was all done here. There's a very interesting shot coming up that's worth pointing out. It's a glass shot. So effectively, they put a piece of glass in front of the camera, and the only live thing in it is a very wide shot of the runway, which you'll see in a second. Here it comes, that shot there. The only live thing is, all the rest is glass put up against the camera. It's incredible. And those old skills now, of course, are non-existent. It's all digital, of course. But the next morning, that's what we got in our dailies. And yet the only live thing in the picture are people running along the runway and the runway itself.
Wow.
Yeah, that's great. One of the things that I really like about mid-90s action films is it's kind of this watershed moment, because it's not too long after that you're getting things like Armageddon that are like all CG, but right here in the sweet spot of the mid-90s there's a lot of miniature work, a lot of matte painting work, and then just sort of with touches added.
Sorry guys to interrupt, but this shot here is real, all real, no digital, nothing. All that is absolutely real. 7 takes, 7 motorcycles destroyed.
Oh my God.
But in order to get the motorcycle and the plane, because obviously the plane has to come in low and at speed, and the motorcycle cueing the motorcycle at the same time so that they could both be in shot at the same time, that was 7 takes. A second unit went out. I storyboarded the whole thing, and those poor buggers had to go way up in the mountains and shoot it, but they did a great job. So
did people have to
man that did the bungee jump?
Sorry?
Was it the same stuntman that did the bungee jump?
No, it may well have been, God knows.
So did people have to go down there and clean up a bunch of broken motorcycles off the bottom of a mountain? That's amazing.
Indeed they did.
So these
a lot
were
of model work.
shots?
Yeah, that was second unit, and it took them weeks to get that.
And that was in Switzerland.
Yeah, that was in Switzerland, absolutely. Yeah, and there's a lot of what's interesting about this film is that there's a lot of model work in it, a lot of model work, forced perspective, stuff like that. All the old tricks, which they don't do anymore, unfortunately, because they worked really well. The title sequence here, Danny Kleinman, who's done them, this was the first time he had come in to do it, and this was his first sequence he ever did, was GoldenEye, and he's subsequently done all the rest of them. Very talented guy.
Oh wow!
But those are memorable.
Yeah,
from the Bond movies, don't you? Title sequence, they're just they're iconic.
They're awesome.
Yeah.
What was the process like developing this title sequence?
You know, it's pretty much what he does is he comes up with a concept, we look at it, we make suggestions, but in all honesty, it's pretty much him, because his concepts were always very good, and the thing was that apart from minor adjustments, really, the work's all his. I have to give him credit for all of that, and I guess the subsequent ones as well. Very talented guy.
And of course, the Bond theme song is another super important part.
Oh,
and
Yeah, this
Tina
was
Turner here.
Tina Turner and The Edge, and they composed it. Absolutely. And actually, yeah.
Do you guys have favorites that stand out? I mean, obviously, you probably have a soft spot for this one, but do you have favorite Bond themes that, that stand out?
Goldfinger for me is without doubt the best.
yeah, it's a hard one. There's so many good ones.
Yeah. Yes, all
I actually
the
really
Russian
like the one Chris Cornell from Soundgarden did is really good. I'm forgetting which movie it was.
was mine.
But he did
Royale. That was Martin's other one, yeah.
Oh, that's right. It was yours.
Come on, Brian.
Yeah, that was awesome.
Now, look, I'm going to hand this to Famke because this is her doing all. She's in the Ferrari.
No, we're going to do this together, Martin, because I actually have some questions for you too. Because I think what probably might be interesting for people to hear the process a little bit, because you saw how many women for this part? Would you guess roughly?
What do you mean? You're talking about?
Yeah, for my character, how many women did you see before I was cast?
Do you know, I hate to tell you, very, very few, Famke. We came to the States. Pam Dixon was the one who said, I think Famke would be terrific. And you're damn near the first one, because we had the casting session at MGM, if you remember, I think.
Yeah.
And to be honest, that part we hadn't given any. You know, we were just waiting to see who was suggested and casting. And I think you were pretty much once we finished that session, we said, well, it's let's go with Famke. Who's terrific. I honestly,
but I was flown to London for a screen test after that, so there was still
you would be, but that's standard procedure, though, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, of course.
Regardless of, do you know what I mean? They screen test everybody in terms of whether you've been selected or not. So I think you got it pretty much on the first go, to be honest.
I just didn't know that.
This car chase, of course, was in France, near Nice, up in the mountains there. I actually slightly forget exactly what the location was, but you did your stuff in the Ferrari here, didn't you?
I did, and I was I wanted to take it for a spin, for a test drive, but I had to do it with the stunt driver next to me, and and it's probably best for everyone. I'm a bit out of control when I'm behind the wheel of a car.
It did get damaged on one cut with the stunt drive, and it cost them $80,000 to repair the bloody thing.
From what I remember, he was crying, and he was, I had a male stunt person for I had a stunt man to double me for the driving sequence, and because I think they all belonged to the Ferrari, but I can't remember. And so it was a big deal when that car crashed, and I remember sort of the eyelashes and like everything going places when I saw him coming out of the car.
I mean, the conceit. I always think the conceit of this chase is a bit ridiculous, because a Ferrari like that and a 65 Aston Martin compete.
Right.
Well, it's great to come straight out of the gate with the Aston Martin, after the title sequence.
Yes, I think the 65 Aston, I can actually take credit for that idea. One of the few things I can take credit for, but there we have it. And we did this shot from behind here.
In this movie you can take credit for.
Yeah, that studio you see there, and this is location now. And then we crane up and we see Monte Carlo. That's what we did. So the two shot in the front was location. Then, of course, we did this shot, which is, if you've been to the casino in Monte Carlo, this is exactly it. So, don't sit there, boys, get another chair. Right, so this is the wider shot. We actually shot in the casino. The opening shot inside the casino is shot at the casino. Then we built the rest in the studio.
Now, yeah, we did get to meet Xenia there in the. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
Oh no, I just remember that we were shooting that scene in the studio, and that, you know, as always, we wake up at whatever 4 o'clock in the morning to go to set, get into hair and makeup and whatever. And for whatever reason, I thought it would. Am I right in believing and remembering that I chose the cigar as a prop, Martin?
Yes, and by the way, one of my favorite scenes is is you dealing with the prop in the scene that's about to happen in any second.
Exactly.
I never stop laughing at the scene. And you deliver it brilliantly. I mean, just great.
I know, but it made me so nauseous.
Straight up with a twist. Straight up with a twist. And the Admiral always makes me laugh as well.
Yes.
I do want to ask too about this scene. How much fun is it? I mean, this is about the most Bond scene that you could possibly shoot. Like, you know, you're in a casino playing Baccarat. Does anybody actually know how to play Baccarat, by the way?
Well, Famke does.
Of course.
And obviously, of course, you have to know the game, of course. But it was all the innuendo that went on that I think makes this scene so funny. It's a really good scene. And of course, she's got a short fuse, so she gets very pissed off, and you know, she's
a bit unhinged.
There's something too about this. At this point, you know, the world is, everybody knows Bond at this point when you're making this film. Like, everybody sort of knows in on the joke, so to speak. So, like, you know, there are things that you can play, like you can really commit to that otherwise might play as camp, but it doesn't, like, there's such an earnest aspect to this film that, like, was there freedom in knowing that the audience would go along with you, like, no matter where you went with this film and with.
Well, I think it's all about actually what's the word, playing it for real. I know that's a cliche, but you know what, you can't mug for the camera. You've absolutely got to believe in the part and play it for real, which they both do. But you know, and that's what makes it so good, really, is and this is a great scene. This is the scene you're looking at now, where the Admiral turns up. And the dialogue was very good too. But here's Famke and her cigar, which never fails to get a laugh from me. Straight up with it. And of course, Pierce with those looks. Manages to sell it really, really well.
So Famke, there's you mentioned the cigar was your choice. How I mean, just talk about how you got into this character, how you did the development of Xenia Onatopp. Because here, I mean, early on in this film, you've got, I mean, this is a solid couple of pages worth of dialogue that's just great to kind of set her up and establish, like, what we're going to get from Xenia. So, like, what went into developing this character?
You know, the biggest thing for me was. It felt like there was a lot of pressure. I put a lot of pressure on myself more than anything, of having seen what Bond women, how they've been portrayed in the past, and finding a way to come up with a character that could be seen in the mid-90s and by women who had now gone through a whole different time and were seen differently. And I just wanted to come up with a way to make her really strong and stand out on her own and not be a prop in the way that we'd seen a lot of those Bond women. Probably didn't help that, you know, like I said before, like I mentioned before, the Bond's producers have always had this incredible way of promoting these films. And the first week of filming, we had probably about 200 people of the press over to do a big press conference and to introduce the characters and, you know, Martin, of course, and and storyboards, and everything was set up. And I hadn't actually shot one scene, and I already was introduced to the British press, and the British press is notoriously bad and difficult and, hard to deal with. And so I felt this enormous pressure all of a sudden of, I have to do this. And I'm very shy by nature. I was an introverted kid. And so for me to take this, I thought the only way to bring this character to life is to just dive off the deep end and go completely big and scary and do things that I was really uncomfortable with. But so that I could, at the end of the day, say, well, I tried, and I made her unique and strong, and with, a bit of a sense of humor and, a twinkle in the eye and like a wink to the audience kind of thing, because that's what Bond to me always represented. Was on the one hand was these incredible action sequences, and then on the other hand, this kind of tongue-in-cheek and a bit over the top, and so there was like a balance going on between all of it. So that's, and I had very little to lose. Nobody knew who I was. I had shot just a few films before that, very few, so I just went for it. But it was scary.
I really love your character in this movie because it genuinely feels like she's having just a really good time in everything she's doing. She's grinning, going full speed in the car. It's not necessarily just like maniacal, pure evil villain. She's got that side to her, but she's also just having a blast, which I think is so fun. There's a big smile on your face through a lot of scenes, and it seems like the character itself is really just enjoying going through everything. Like very, I would say voracious is a good word to use, especially for this scene, which is this is the scene where like any kid who was watching this movie, this is when their parents walked in and they're like, oh, what are you watching?
Yes. I put him in the hospital, if I remember correctly. Martin, do you remember this?
The tragedy is the actor died not after the film was released and so forth. But it was very fun. You're right about Famke. She just took it. Took it to the limit, which was great. But what was great was you believed her, and she made such an iconic kind of villain out of this. Well, I think it's one of the best. It's certainly one of the best Bond women in any of the Bond films. And she does have the sense of humor, but she's got all the other attributes as well. But she really committed to it, and she didn't hold back at all, and it's all there on screen. So all credit to her. I loved her in it.
And particularly in the scene we just saw, it reminds me of when you see we're seeing how the henchperson is going to kill people, right? Like that first hint at like what the weapon really. It reminds me of Oddjob throwing his hat at the statue. It's that kind of.
But it's also that voracious appetite for wanting to kill people. It's almost, you know what I mean? It's
it's psychotic.
Which she's got.
It's psychotic.
Yeah, it's psychotic.
It's sadistic for sure. Like you could shoot him or stab him, but you're like, what if I?
She's a wild animal. That's how I saw her, as like ferocious with a ferocious appetite, and this, Russian trained and just
So this is interesting. We're in Monte Carlo Harbor. The French gave us this. It's a stealth cruiser, I think it is. They gave it to us. We didn't have to pay a franc for it. They put it in Monte Carlo Harbor, and the helicopter was a Tigre, which was at the time up against the Apache. There was some huge deal for NATO to buy this thing, or I forget what it was. The grin on this guy's face says it all. And incredibly, we got both the helicopter, and the cruiser were put in there. Didn't cost us a dime, which was a fantastic piece of work from from Tom Pevsner, who was the executive producer who arranged all this. And here we are, Monte Carlo Harbor. The guy on the left is our stunt arranger, Simon Crane. Right?
Oh, of course.
That's Simon. I had him play the part. And the guy on the left, I think, is the guy that went over the dam.
Oh. Isn't it funny? It's kind of I've heard that several times about, like, you know, stunt people getting sort of the reward for jumping off the dam is to get shot later on. Like, like, let's make sure you get your face on camera since you did that dam jump. You know.
Well, you'd be amazed how many times in movies we use the same people over and over again for different scenes. Stunt people, I'm talking about. So here goes the helicopter. This helicopter could actually loop the loop and do all sorts of stuff. So off he goes. And then of course we cut to Russia. We go to Severnaya, which is they all clap. And there
right, and Russia we were meant to shoot in St. Petersburg, right, Martin? And then that fell apart and you had to build.
Yeah, the reason was budget, quite frankly. Now I've lost the. Oh no, we've got them there. Good. Now this here is that shot on the lot. What you see next, the wide shot, that is forced perspective. That huge dish you see is no more than about 20 feet high, and it's a model. Okay, now we all in shot at the same time, forced perspective. Now we come down to the real doorway, and now we come inside the computer room.
I also like the sled dogs opening this sequence on the sled dogs, because it was a similar thing that you did in the opening sequence with, you know, you start the movie on the plane flying over that's you know, you start the scene with the escape route that will be paid off later, which I like establishing these sled dogs, because in this instance, like, this is getting ahead of ourselves a little bit, it's a solid 20 minutes before comes back.
Exactly. And of course that's how she gets away from the place at the end of it, right? Alan Cummings, you can see there, I don't think he was very well known then. Terrific guy, right? Really,
yeah, and then I ended up doing X-Men movies with him after.
You did what?
He was in some of the X-Men movies I did.
Mm-hmm. Oh, of course, Don. Yes, and indeed.
Yeah,
he was
and
also an Eyes
I
Wide.
Also ended up working with afterwards on.
Oh, that's right. Yeah.
Yes.
Eyes Wide Shut, of course, he was in. Absolutely.
Here's let's dig into a question from the audience. There's Simon Drake, who's watching on Cinefix, has a question, and this can go to both of you guys. Martin, we'll start with you though. Do you find it harder to shoot an action scene or a dramatic scene? Do you have a preference, or is there a?
Well, they're very different, of course. An action scene is just about the action, so it's generally multi-camera. You know, stunts, arrangement. You've got a time-consuming to get it all done. Whereas with a dramatic scene, of course, it's, you know, you're in a much more what's the personal space, really, with just the actors and the performance and so forth. In terms of preference, really, I don't have a preference. I love the acting scenes, of course. But a really good action scene, as you'll see later with the tank, also was a terrific kick to do some of those shots, as you can well imagine. So,
how about in terms of making the scheduling out the whole movie? What order do you prefer to shoot? Is it easier to start a production off with the action stuff, or do you start a production off with the more either dramatic or the dialogue heavy stuff?
Well, you know, often you don't have a choice. Really, it depends on your schedule, where you're shooting. You know, what thing? I forget how many countries we went to in this. We're based out of England, obviously. We went to Russia, or should I say, second unit went to Russia, so schedule is dictated by the finances, if you see what I mean. Availability of actors, for example, has a lot to do with it. An actor may not be available for the first 2 weeks, can only make weeks 4, 5, and 6. That's what they're contracted for. So that dictates the schedule entirely. Ideally, for me, it would be great to start off with performance, really, simply because, you know, you're working with the actors, and you're setting the characters and so forth. It's not so high pressure, right? And it's always nice to perhaps get 3 or 4 days of the acting, maybe even a week of it before you go into the action. That would be my preference. Now, this is all set, of course, as you can well imagine.
I love that shot when they're both walking down the hallway. It's super cool. It's also there's a lot of really interesting sort of computer interfaces in this movie, and it's sort of paleo-futuristic in that, like, we didn't necessarily have this stuff exactly like this in the 90s, but it seems like the set designers invented a lot of tech for this film, which is obviously, which is what happens with Bond movies. But I really like the design of it in this movie specifically. It's very far-fetched, but also grounded.
Now, the scene coming up is, again, one of my favorites. Famke absolutely steals it. So you just, this is, it's violent and it's hilarious at the same time. But it's really where she goes for it. I mean, this is her.
Yeah, Famke, from scene to scene.
I learned early on with Martin that he, and I think, I don't know if I give traits, like secrets of the traits away here, Martin, but as a director, I think probably to keep the control as much as you could, you had a lot of the sequences already cut in your mind so that you wouldn't shoot an entire scene sometimes, only certain aspects of it. Whereas some directors shoot full wide and they shoot a close-up, medium, whatever. But with Martin, he knew exactly how he wanted to shoot it. So there were moments where it was like, no, Martin, I wanna do this thing here. So can you please give me a close-up, because there's this, so it was just something that, in my limited knowledge of filmmaking at the time, but I noticed how he was filming, and that we weren't always going to have a chance to do everything fair.
It's interesting. I very rarely do master shots, and I never just repeat the scene over and over again in these setups. If there are mid shots or I'm doing close over, I just pick up halfway through the scene, or where I've marked it up where we should be in close up, and I run perhaps 2 lines earlier than that to get into it, because I think actors just get tired. I mean, it's exhausting doing this stuff over and over and over again. For an actor, it must be purgatory sometimes to repeat the whole scene, doing a wide shot, master. You know what I mean? I don't believe in it. And there we are.
I do love that scene we just saw where Xenia guns down the entire room full of people, and she's just having the time of your life. Like, you're laughing, you're smiling.
Basically orgasmic. I mean, that was kind of
it's almost orgasmic, the whole thing.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
And
in fact, it is.
Like I had nothing to use.
Now, these planes you see in the background are all just cardboard cutouts.
Oh, really?
Interesting.
Oh, that's amazing.
Yeah, they just stage weight brace and a bit of blockboard. We had a brilliant set painter. He just painted the damn things. Here she is.
That AK-47, I got to bring home. I was renting a house in London at the time, in Hampstead Heath area. And for me to assemble it, disassemble it, all of it, they said, take it home and you can practice with it. Today, that would be unheard of. You could never nobody would ever give you an AK-47 to do that. But yeah, I did. And it was amazing. It really helped me, because with things like that, you don't realize, as for most people probably, is you want it. You want to look really good.
That's a model you can see. Model and all that's model. These are models. That's not.
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned earlier the miniature work in this, the model work in the film, because it's really good. And watching this movie again, it's wonder again, like mid 90s action stuff, when like all the model stuff was really good. And there's a legacy of that in the Bond films. You think about like
there was a great guy called Derek Meddings, who I think is one of Peter Jackson's heroes. and he was our model maker. He did all the Bond films up to this, and brilliant model maker. Sort of totally instinctive, and he died sadly about 3 or 4 months after we finished, but he was absolutely superb. And I think Peter Jackson, as I say, rates him as probably one of the greatest model makers and practical effects guys in the business. And here we have Moneypenny, of course. We have her.
I really like this scene too, because Moneypenny is punching back and very much from the high ground here, like, you know, and that's kind of, there's a lot. Famke, you mentioned it earlier too about you know, historically the women in the Bond franchises, and there's a turning point here in GoldenEye where the women in this film really carry it.
And I think we can also largely attribute that to Barbara Broccoli and, you know, everybody put together, Martin as well, just to make this into a more modern day James Bond, where we weren't just, and we had stronger characters.
And here, of course, for the first time you see Judi Dench, right? Which was, and it's interesting because I think it was my idea to make it a woman, because Stella Remington at the time was the head of MI6 or whatever it is in London, and I had actually seriously almost cast someone else in the part, and John Calley, who was the head of Unidatus at the time, he was our boss basically, said, look, if you're going to cast a woman in this part, cast someone bloody good, he said. Go and get Judi Dench. That was his words. So we did, and
wow,
that's how she got cast. But it was he was absolutely right. Get someone who's absolutely terrific, and that's what it came on it. All of this is studio. It's our wonderful Natalia.
How many months did we shoot? 5? Something like that?
118 days, 120 days. But that was travel days too. We went, I can't even remember how many countries we went to. Where the hell did we go? God. And this is her walking around with the carnage. And of course, all these are practical effects that are about to happen, and off goes GoldenEye.
The satellite shots in this in the film really remind me of those great the Connery era you only live twice kind of satellite shots.
Yeah, all the satellite obviously is all model. This is all practical. And of course, the effects, we shot this in the studio. Whites out the film, of course, and
did you build the set with an idea as like what would look cool exploding, and that's what we'll put on the set for the first part in the first place? No. Or did you just look around when you got to the end and try to blow everything up?
Well, no, it was all part of the set, to be honest. The all the bits that blow up, like the TV screen, and this is all sorry to interrupt, but this is all model. This stuff, a bit of digital with the explosions they look at too. But you'll now see a plane. This one, the last plane, I think, goes into in this one here. That's all model, all that stuff, all model. Boom, the whole thing goes up. Yeah, all of that.
I was going to say it's sort of it's an interesting decision. We don't really see James Bond for a while during this James Bond movie, right? Like,
no, you stick with Natalia for the whole, for all of this part. It's her escape from the facility and so forth. This is all model, of course. There.
Yeah, and that's what I think makes Natalia such a good character, and again to sort of circle back to the women in this film, like the agency that Natalia has in this whole sequence. And Brian, to your point, are like Bond isn't around in a Bond movie for like 15 minutes here. It makes it I think that's one of the reasons that makes this movie, one of the more iconic Bond films.
Yeah, and this huge thing that's going to come down was all done in the studio, one take, as you can imagine. Right, this, which is the point of the radio dish, I think, is the that comes in. These are always nerve-wracking to film, simply because you know you've only got one take. There's no way you can reset this thing. And if anything goes wrong, well, and again, in those days, no digital to get you out of. Here she comes, she walks away, and down comes Monster. Boom. Wow. Which gives her, that allows her to escape, of course, by the hole that is in.
So that was one take and just a handful of cameras?
Yeah. Probably about 4 cameras on that, maybe 5, I can't remember, but this is all.
Take just a few minutes to reset that entire ceiling.
Yes. Well, I have to tell you, it was a tight budget on this movie, simply because no one had any idea after 6 or 7 years as to whether Bond was still relevant. I mean, they were genuinely worried about that. So our budget on this came out at 58 million, was the final budget for this movie.
Wow. Compare that to today.
Yeah,
well,
right.
I think they're close to 300 at the moment, so
Oh my God.
that gives you an idea of.
Well, kudos to you, Martin, for putting that. Look at this. This is 58 million.
I know all this. I know. Here we go. So, Michael Kitchen, of course, playing the techie guy is very funny.
I do like how Bill Tanner will always be the only guy in the room with a loose tie.
I know. Yeah.
He's just tired.
He just he also makes that gaffe about M, where she comes up. If I want sarcasm, I'll talk to my evil queen of numbers. Yes, and I want sarcasm, I'll talk to my kids. Thank you very much. And then I think he looks at the screen, and then we have him seeing the little blob of Natalia.
Here's a question for somebody. Calvin Dyson, who's watching on Cinefix, wants to know. We talked a little bit about the books earlier. That might have been actually before we came on. But did Famke? This is for both of you, but Famke, we can start with you. Did either of you take any inspiration from the original Fleming books for the work on this film?
I did not personally, because usually when I'm cast in something and I play a character, I don't want to reference anything. I want to be as truthful and original as I can possibly be. And the moment I look at something or read something, I might, it somehow might get in my head and it will appear on screen in a way that I won't be able to take credit for it because it's not mine, it's not unique, it's not my own. So I steer away from I have read the books, but since then, not something that I wanted to do before. Martin, what about you?
Yeah, to be honest, no, is the answer to that. Because Bond is very different from the books in these earlier movies. Even the Connery ones are very different. If you read the book of Casino Royale, Bond, he smokes too much, he drinks too much. He's got all of these what's the word? Not weaknesses exactly, but he's got all of these quirks these vices, and it doesn't hesitate to talk about them in the books. There's also no humor in the books; it doesn't exist. And I think it was Terence Young in Dr. No who introduced the humor. So the answer to the question is no, I didn't. Yeah. And this is a very iconic scene because of the business about you're the dinosaur speech that she gives, and that was an answer to. There was a lot of people before we shot all talking about, well, Bond, is anyone going to see it? Is it past its sell-by date? So this scene was deliberately kind of engineered to essentially ask the question that or answer the question that the audiences would ask. You're a sexist, misogynist dinosaur, which is kind of took the sting out of it, which was I thought terrific, and in the mouth of Judi Dench, of course.
Right.
It makes it doubly terrific.
No, that's amazing. I really appreciate that you were able to inject so much humor in this movie. I think that's why it connected with me in so many ways, because it is a genuinely funny film at times. There are some really biting comebacks. There are some just really great writing, really funny lines, and it was. I think it was really nice to see Bond kind of put in his place by multiple women in this film for various reasons, because that sort of made you go, oh, right. Like this is not the old James Bond, this is a modernized take on the saga and the story and the character. And let's see how he can kind of deal with this new reality now, which is great.
Exactly. And this sets it up really, this movie. It's a great scene between them both.
Well, there's a great just all the cards on the table energy to it in a franchise that's known for sort of cheeky innuendo. Like here's two people just saying what they feel about each other, which is really great.
This is St. Petersburg, obviously. That's St. Petersburg. That's London.
And we talked about Ken Adam earlier. Yeah, no. We mentioned Ken Adam and some of the old and Peter Lamont, obviously, and actually works in the film. But this enormous Russian conference room with all of this space that's not being used and a bunch of chairs that aren't even being used. It's such a strangely like classic Russian scene for a Bond film, right?
Yeah, and it's such an interesting scene where he's obviously lying through his teeth, and they're all questioning him. Yeah, good scene. Very has a Russian feel about it.
The idea that this is
I do appreciate too that. Oh yeah, no, this is a great one. But it's also that this movie sort of very handily juggles multiple villains to the point where the audience is not really even sure which one they should feel threatened by the most, right? I mean, you're bouncing between. Yeah, I appreciate that. Kind of keeps you on your toes.
Yeah, so there are various villains basically, both male and female, which is great.
He has such a great face, Godfrey.
Yeah, doesn't he? He's
so
a very
much
good actor. Yeah.
Yeah, he's the type of villain that you almost feel bad for. He's squirming under the weight of his own plot.
And one of the great things about Bond is when with the producers is they allow you to use people who are not necessarily stars or have big names, anything else, as in Gottfried John, very well known in Germany, but no one else really knows him. And they allow you to do this. And that I think works fantastically well. They don't say, well, he hasn't got a name, therefore don't use him. They will. Debbie McWilliams, the casting director, very theatre orientated, goes all over Europe looking at the theatre. He goes to the shows to see if there's anybody new. You're never forced to, because someone's name means something, to actually use that person. So you really get to use the actors that you want. And here's, of course, Hugh, right?
These are always some of my favorite film scenes in these movies, because it's a hybrid of there's a little bit of slapstick. It's got a little bit of Willy Wonka's Chocolate Factory. You've got a little bit of, they're constantly guilting and shaming Bond for taking his toys out in the wild and utterly destroying these one of a kind, original inventions and stuff like that. These are always so much fun to me. And I feel like GoldenEye, this whole sequence is one of my favorite of any of them.
Well, the hilarious thing is when he gets the pen out, Desmond could never remember how many times he pushed the bloody thing. So he would say, and you click it 3 times, and he'd click it 4 times. And then he would say, and to disarm it, you click it 3 times, and he'd do it twice. It went on. And I turned to the script girl, who was like, no idea what the invective coming out of her mouth was, but it was hilarious. It's very funny. And he actually says, Desmond, he says, I'm the worst guy in the world with props. I can't handle them.
That's amazing, because that's his whole, Q's whole thing. Is look at these amazing props.
I did get them in the end, but my God, we went a few takes for it. It was hilarious. And of course,
this does have a very Roger Moore era feel.
I'm afraid it's but that was fun.
Yeah.
You know, we had a few of those scenes, and I think,
oh yeah,
and he's so marvelous. You know,
this is cute.
he blows the head off. I always love this gag at the end.
Yeah, this whole scene always had a very sort of like Leslie Nielsen Naked Gun feel to me, which I really love.
It's right up there with it, isn't it? And
Yeah.
then that's my
And this, where he said, "That's my sandwich."
it's my lunch.
And of course, now for the Russian airport, you see there, that's Ascot Racecourse. So it's leading up to the stands at Ascot, be used as the airport.
I wanted to ask about Jodan Baker here, because he just in just 2 films prior to this, he was a bad guy. He was a villain.
This is probably me, because I'd worked with Jodan on a TV series called Edge of Darkness that I did for the BBC, and he played a big part in that. And it was probably me that got him in. I can't quite remember, but he taught me.
Yeah, going straight from the car at Q Branch to this car in Russia.
Sorry, darling.
Again, like, let me see the tattoo and Muffy, and they're like, this is just a straight up comedy scene in the middle.
I know, it's cute.
And then I love the line that the scene ends with too. Do you do any gardening?
Actually, there is a story about that. And there was a whole kind of he was always fascinated by gardening and plants and so forth. I cut a lot of it out because the film was running long when I tested it, about 10 minutes long. So I cut some of that stuff out. So they're a little bit out on their own, those lines. But it was just necessary for the pace of the whole movie to take some of that stuff out.
Yeah, because he comes back and mentions the trees and the types of plants that he sees in scenes towards the end.
Exactly.
But in this case, it works like a great joke. Like it's like he's asking about how to get rid of a tattoo in that particular line.
Yeah. So it stands alone, really. But it did have a whole background, this stuff, and a speech. And this is shot in London. This is a location in London.
Here's a question coming from Mac McCormick, who's watching on IGN's YouTube channel. Do we know who came up with the name Xenia Onatop?
I think that was I think that was Bruce Fierstein, who was the last writer, and he was with me for about 10 weeks in prep, where we sort of refined the script, and I think it was him that came up with that. And it's really the last. Sorry, it's the last.
Even just seeing Yeah, go ahead.
Pussy Galore, like Pussy Galore, you know. So it's in that.
It's an
It's in
iconic
that
name.
one. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And Famke, even just seeing that name, like in the script, like how much did that affect? Like you're like, oh, okay, I get who this is.
I mean, it says it all. The fact that she kills men between her thighs. Their name is Xenia on the top. It's a Russian accent, you know.
Yeah.
And they exploit the name a lot too.
Yes. Right.
In sort of. There he is. Oh my God! He says this. Meet me.
It makes me like nostalgic that there was. Yeah, right. There was an era where you could get an email and it would just say incoming email because you got so few emails that it would do that. And now that it would do that like 5,000 times a day. And this what a wonderful time.
You have to turn all those notifications off.
I just noticed his peace sign sweater too.
Yeah, mid-90s was another golden age of hacking, I think. Like it was
yes.
We weren't all quite 100% aware of the internet and what it was going to be and what it was going to mean to us, but like we knew it was out there and we knew there were people who knew how to use it.
This car is very Mr. Bean.
This car is I love it so much.
Yeah.
The color, the whole thing.
Yeah. You have this.
The fact that they don't really fit in it. It's great.
Yeah, well,
I know. And it's this
and
bright
hats,
primary color against. Yeah, with the hats are all puffed up against the top.
And then we play the church scene. This is in London. It's a Greek Orthodox, actually. The church, she comes in. This is the meeting place with her and the pub. You can keep working, darling, if you want. Yeah, it's fine.
Talk about tracking down locations for a Bond film. Like there's got to be a certain criteria that any location for any scene needs to meet, right? To be in a Bond film.
Not necessarily. I mean, the thing is that locations are finally up to the director. I mean, you have to. You obviously want to have terrific locations for a Bond film and so forth, but it's always down to the director to decide what locations are good. And as I say, both Barbara and Michael, our producers, they give you a very free hand on that. And to be honest, they only comment if they feel you're stepping outside of Bond, as it were. If you're stepping outside of the character, or indeed of the sort of the look of the film. But to be honest, they just they just give you free rein on that. And as with most movies, of course, the director finally decides all the locations.
This is a fascinating Minnie Driver cameo, by then where she sings, and then really it cuts to, and then they say, "Who's strangling the cat?" which is just insulting her singing voice. Also, we got another. I lost track of. I think it's probably a second or third really great, iconic, amazing hat that Xenia shows up in. She's just in the background of that one shot with this, and then when she shows up earlier and she shoots these two guys in point blank, she's got that very comically oversized hat. Great hats in this film.
Yeah, we haven't had a chance. We haven't talked about the wardrobe yet. The wardrobe for Xenia is pretty incredible. How much did you get to participate in that?
Oh my God, it was really amazing because we had not only the most incredible costume designer, but we were in London and everything was custom made for me to fit. My boots, my hats, my hat maker, shoe make, and every costume, everything's. And I love that. I come from a background of fashion, so I was already I had a lot of knowledge of clothing, but then to see how much time and detail went into it, I really loved it. I have such a respect for craftsmanship like that in the way that it was made. You know, those old-fashioned ways of houses and how people did. Yeah, I went everywhere with her to do it too. It was great.
Oh, that's awesome. Did you get to take anything home? Did you get to steal any hats or anything like that? Or
no,
we gotta hunt them down for you. I don't
walk around in those in Manhattan, in New York.
No, she looked pretty good, I have to say. Yeah,
that would be fun just to decide to go out one day in full like military Xenia, like with the big gold buttons and.
Yes. Minus the AK.
There's like a few,
right?
Minus the AK.
Yes,
there's a few cities where you could pull that off, and I feel like New York is maybe one of them, where you could just walk out and people will be like, "Well, maybe, sure, why not?"
Yeah, there's plenty of crazies everywhere. So
there's somebody that's making a choice today.
So here we are. We set all this up with what's it? God, I've
yeah, Robbie Coltrane is he's always a really interesting guy. I feel like he's one of those actors that's like he's the most interesting part of whatever scene he's in.
Very much so. He's terrific. If he was in that terrific TV series, what was it called? The British TV series, Mark Cracker, I think it was called. Absolutely terrific. And he appears, I think, in the next two Bond.
Yeah, he shows back up. Yeah.
Yeah.
I like his character as a as a source of exposition to sort of help move the story along a little bit, but also like the flawed sort of squirmy like who's counting how many helicopters I have is such a fun little underbelly.
Yeah, no, he brings something to the scene, doesn't he? This is a great scene, of course. It's one of the best Famke scenes about to come up. This was studio, by the way. We shot this in the studio.
Yeah, well, and also I broke my rib during the scene.
I know. I remember.
Yes.
She did,
well, the walls were padded, and Pierce was, throwing me up against the wall, and I said to Pierce, just don't worry about it. Just throw me hard because I don't want to have to act it too much, and it's going to look fake, and I don't want to have to fake it. So just do it. And then he did it, and then all of a sudden I couldn't breathe. So we had to stop filming for a bit, and then it wasn't until I came back to America that I found out that I had broken a rib. But they hired somebody, which is still a bit puzzling to me, this woman who came to do work on my back, and then she said she started talking about like, she was like sort of psychic, I guess. Started talking about, I see, do you like to drive fast? And I go, yeah. She goes, well, just be careful. And I was like, oh. And then she said, do you like comedy? And I said, yes, I love comedy. She goes, I can see Woody Allen smiling at you. And only reason why, because I wrote at the time, I wrote to my then husband this thing of like, wow, this woman said this thing. And then I got cast in a Woody Allen movie about, I don't know, I can't remember, 3 months, 6 months after or something. But the most hilarious part to me is that she wasn't that psychic that she knew that I had a rib. But yeah.
Oh.
But yeah, so I guess I filmed with a broken rib for the rest of it.
And actually, we double pierced a couple of times here. It's a great scene. And actually, we put kind of rubber wallpaper up, didn't we, Famke? But that didn't.
Yeah, you padded it.
Didn't do that much good, I don't think. This is just great. Look at this. Bam! She takes the hit there.
Well, it's such a memorable fight scene too, because it combines, I think, pretty much everything that makes the Bond franchise famous, right? Like it's a fight, and like all of the judo tosses kind of feel like the fight scenes from the Connery area, but it's violent and sexy and a little cheeky, and like it's everything that the Bond franchise is rolled into one just really cool fight scene.
Yeah, it's a great scene. Yeah, it's
also formed it's formed from the context that despite all the conflict happening in this story right now, James Bond has time for like a leisurely swim. He's like, I'm gonna go jump, swim around for a little while, and he's like, oh, you know what? Yeah, he is James Bond after all. He's like, I need some me time right now.
Now, this little shot you see here, what you'll see is when he rabbit punches her on the back of the neck, we go close. I had to do this weeks later because the sensors wouldn't allow the hand to chop a neck in shot. It had to be done out of shot. So we had to go back in. Not the smoothest cut in the world, but
that's another iconically the chop to the back of the neck, which I don't understand how that knocks anybody out, but boy does it in movies.
The British censors said no, so we had to change it, unfortunately.
Martin, can you tell us about this statue part? Because this is, to me, one of my favorite settings in the whole movie. It's borderline horror film. It's really fascinating. What is this place?
Well, first of all, we built it, so it's outside on the lot, and Peter Lamont. This was where Glasnost, I suppose, where Russia had collapsed. So these are all the old statues of Lenin and Stalin and so forth. They've all been pushed into this kind of graveyard, if you will. So that was the idea, that he's now walking amongst the ruins of what is left of the Bolshevik communist rule, and that's where it came from, basically. And it seemed a perfect place, of course, to reveal, reveal 006, Sean Bean. It was a great sort of surprise moment in the film where he comes out, he walks into the light, there he is, and off we go.
Now, a great thing about this reveal is that Sean Bean, almost to the point of parody, has become this character that gets killed off very early on in the movies he's in. And in this one, that happens, but it turns out to be a misdirect, and he returns as sort of the true villain of the film.
Sure.
Which I love.
I do enjoy. You can't find him somewhere. The supercuts of Sean Bean dying in movies that are they just keep getting longer.
He dies in every movie he's in. He drops from a great height.
I've died quite a few myself, so.
That's true. That is very true.
Yeah. He's a fun guy, Sean. Actually, he likes his beer and he likes his soccer. He's a terrific actor. He's really good.
I know.
So this going back to, yeah. I do like it in this film. He's a little I guess fancier is the first word that pops into my head than he normally is. Like he's putting on a sort of a more, it's like he's putting on a sort of a more James Bond voice in a way.
Indeed, he is. Well, it's a much more English voice. I don't know. He's from north of England, I think. Sean, and it's northern. Yeah, I'm not quite sure. But
yeah, this blew my mind when I first saw it. The idea of a sort of like evil James Bond, like there's multiple 07s or 06s, and here's this evil version that showed up to kind of get revenge, but it was also kind of corrupted by the system that he came up through, which I always thought was so interesting.
Yeah.
Well, it works together with that theme of that, we were talking about with the Judi Dench scene earlier. It's like, what, is Bond, everything we know about Bond, like, is it working still? And here we have, the villain of this movie is, a good foil for that.
And it's also so nice to see all these actual dialogue scenes, so that it's not just action without any kind of.
True.
I mean, that's the biggest difference, I think, between this movie and a lot of the other films that came after that.
No, totally. Yeah, this movie does a really great job of letting sort of characters exist and breathe for a while, which I always love.
And this, of course, is they built a full-size helicopter for this, for all the scene. And when the top comes off, it's obviously models.
I also like as many times as he has sort of slickly gotten out of tough spots in over the years. Here we have James Bond actually headbutting a helicopter.
Ridiculous. Anyway, so he fires off the missiles, and guess what? They turn back.
And we talked earlier about, you know, in thinking about how to stage some of these things, you know, just giving the audience things that they hadn't seen before. Even in the escapes that Bond is famous for, you know, did you have similar conversations around those?
Oh yeah, is to I mean, one of the interesting things in here, of course, is he doesn't have any, you know, apart from his belt and his pen. There are very few gadgets in this movie. Actually, you know, there's not the which in later movies, of course, they happen. But all that's model, of course. We shot that on the lot. Down it comes, right, and then he's out, and then she kicks him in the shin.
Yeah, I guess I never really put that together. He doesn't really have a ton of, you know, rocket shoes and like signature.
None of that.
Like there's the pen is obviously the clicking pen you see return.
Yeah, I mean that, and of course they play a part in it. I mean it's an income vehicle, and off they go into this fast Russian-looking. That's right. Then we get the scene between them both.
I do like the phrase "Russian looking." Like
Yes. And Isabella's interesting. You know, we were like, I think 5 days from shooting, or maybe a week or something, and we still did not have a lead girl. We tested, I think, about 6 girls. We weren't satisfied, and I sat down with Debbie McWilliams. I said, we're shooting in 6 days. We don't have our lead lady. And she said, well, we've gone through everybody. We went through them again. I said, is there any country in Europe you haven't actually gone to check out the talent? She said, there's only one, and that's Sweden. So I said, I said, well, get on the plane and just go to Sweden and, for God's sake, see who you can find. The next morning, she rang and said, I've got the girl. And she turned up with Isabella. And it was terrific. And Isabella was a singer. I mean, I think she had a gold record in Sweden. She's actually Polish, but lived in Sweden. She was a singer, and a fairly successful one over there. And in the end, that's how we got her, literally at the last second.
And this was less than a week before you started shooting. You were just like, yeah, I don't know, go to Sweden. You haven't been to Sweden? Go to Sweden.
Go to Sweden. What country haven't you been to, you know?
Yeah, that's so fun. And why hadn't she gone to Sweden? That's interesting.
Well, yes, you know. And Isabella's great. She's really, really good. And there's a scene I like as well where Oromov goes bananas.
And this is also another scene where Natalia gets to tell the boys to shut up.
Yes.
Which is great.
Boys with toys, I think, was the squabbling that goes on between them and the two guys, and then
Checky Cairo is another actor who he's in that category of like, oh yeah, I love that guy.
Exactly.
Kind of actors.
I think he was in. I saw him in La Femme Nikita. Remember that the movie? He played her boss in La Femme Nikita.
It's a great beard too. How it just cuts diagonally down like the middle of.
We should all have beards like that.
We should all be so lucky.
I don't know if there's a
beard.
I don't know if there's a name for that. It's an amazing. There's got to be a technical term for it.
but quite a heavy accent, but very good actor, and you could understand him, which was great. Yeah.
You were saying something about the lost art of interrogation, Mr. Bond.
In he comes.
And here he's disheveled. He doesn't have his hat or his tie. He's sweaty.
He's obviously had a little bit of vodka. The man's completely. He does this brilliantly, Gottfried. You know, where he starts to sort of piece together his reasons for killing the boss, basically.
Yep.
And this led us on to, you know, it's time for a big action scene, and it's coming up. Of course, we have all the shooting and so forth, which is all great, but the tank chase, that was an idea that came from the special effects guy. He did a, you know, it comes under the category of what haven't an audience seen? Let's do something different. Why don't we have a tank car chase? So literally it was an idea thrown up by him.
Yeah, I've heard that there was a Chris Corbould, right? That
who's probably the best special effects, and I mean practical effect person in the world. I think he's absolutely brilliant. In fact, his whole family are special effects.
Really? Just the family trade.
It's a family trade. Yeah, I think 3 or 4 of them, the brothers all do it. His brother, Neil. Go ahead.
This location is amazing. This old school
library. Yeah, this is the location that was actually at Leavesden where we shot. So we just adapted it to make this sequence.
I love that it's like library on top, tanks on the bottom.
Yeah, tanks.
It's just this pretty standard government building from mid-90s Russia, right?
Mm-hmm.
I remember Isabella saying to me when she knocks over those books, she says, of course it's the woman that screws it all up. I said, it's unfortunately, yes. Editor did a great job on this. Terry Rawlings, he cut Alien, the first Alien, so very good editor.
Oh, man.
You get to pull out the gadget here, of course, coupled with another sexual innuendo.
No, it was exactly the right time in the film to have a big action scene. This is what it.
And as we're sneaking up on the tank chase here, but in terms of sort of the staging of this chase scene, I get a lot of cues from. I mean, there's a Moonraker hovercraft chase kind of energy to it, and you know, the Live and Let Dies, where the boat chase, where all of the cars are piling up and everything. Did you I mean, you want to make sure you do something that the audiences haven't seen, but did you look at earlier Bond films for inspiration?
Well, I knew all those scenes, of course, because I'd seen those Bond films quite a few times. So yes was the answer to this, but it's interesting because we could not afford. The first unit was going to go to Russia, to St. Petersburg, to shoot all of this. But then they said, no, we don't have the money to do that. So how are you going to deal with that? I remember them saying to me. And so I sent the second unit to St. Petersburg to pick up the stuff around the canal. And we built all of this on the lot. So the whole of St. Petersburg, you see, that's obviously the real St. Petersburg. And that there is on the lot. So, you know, we built a huge amount of these sets for St. Petersburg. All of this is built, of course, right?
Can I also ask you about the music cue? Because this is the first time in the film where you use that big brassy.
Well, let me be honest with you. So I was not that happy with the music in the film. I don't think it's. I was disappointed in it, and it was Luc Besson's composer. His name escapes me at the moment.
Eric Serra.
Eric Serra, and I'd seen The Professional, which he'd done a marvelous job on, and 3 or 4 composers turned this film down before we'd shot it. John Barry I went to first, who of course established Bond in many of the Bond films. I loved his music, and so on the 4th one I'd seen the Professional, and I just thought, in keeping with bringing Bond up to date, he would be a perfect candidate for it. But in all honesty, I was disappointed in the music, and again, our budget was not that much, and it was limited to what we could do. And when I was dubbing the tank chase, the music that came in for that was in exactly the same register as the tanks, right? So in other words, it disappeared. And so I rang Eric from London. He lives in France, of course, and said, look, we have a real problem here. And I remember saying to him, look, we have to, no point in using synths for this because it'll just disappear. I said, what we need is the Bond theme, and you always use percussion and brass to crash through all the effects. And I remember his answer to me was, well, lower the effects. So what I did was say, I'm not going to do that. So that was the end of our conversation. And he had an assistant who had composed some music in London. He'd done a couple of movies, done a very good job. He was his sort of man in not French, he was English. So it was a Thursday. I said, you've got the weekend. You take this sequence home. I want the Bond theme. You use brass and percussion. And by Tuesday, I have to record this thing, right? So I said, that's what you're doing this weekend. You are going to compose this. And he did. And that's what you heard. And that's what, there's a disparity between what he did and what the rest of the film does.
Yeah.
So
there was a question from one of our viewers, the Bond blog and James Bond Down Under, who's watching on Cinefix, wanted to know your opinion of the score. So I'm glad we got to. I love that. Yeah. I love that sting though, that big breath, because like in Dr. No, they use that they use that for Bond like walking across a hotel lobby, and then now it's a tank crashing through a wall.
Exactly. And yeah, well, that's the thing. I was definitely disappointed. A lot of people were disappointed, but the die had been cast. There was no going back. We had a date to meet, and we had a budget to keep, and that's how it came about. So a good question, and that's the answer to it. And course, the brass, of course, is great. The famous
the way
shot
the whole sequence ends with the straightening the tie.
I know. Well, I can take credit for that. That's the second thing I can take credit for in this movie, right? Now the train, actually, we had a real train. This was at Leavesden. There were rails there. We had the real engine, and that was all, of course, converted into the so-called armored train that 006 has.
Yeah, there was another question about that. Ethan Strode, who's watching on Cinefix, also wanted to know about this train. And
yeah, well, we start off here, of course, with all this armor plating, which is added, of course, by Peter Lamont, excellent production designer, and this is all at Leavesden. Okay, so we start here, of course, and then we moved up to the railway. Is it Peterborough? I'm slightly hazy on that. I think it's Peterborough, where there is a railway line, and everybody uses it. They used it in Octopussy, I think, a lot up there. It's the one railway line that you can use privately, as it were, and you have total control, everything else. So all the run-by shots you'll see of the train were shot there.
What an audible gulp from Ourumov there too. Like that is the loudest. Like
Yes, he's
he's pulling from his flask like halfway through the car chase scene. He's
sort of
he's
eating
definitely,
and
yeah.
Well, he's wonderful.
Definitely
He's
a little
one of
numb
those
at this
actors.
point.
He's one of those actors that just brings you just that little bit extra. You don't ask for it, but he gives it. And I loved him. I thought he was terrific. These run-by shots, of course, is what I'm talking about in the Peterborough Row. This is a model. This is a model. Right?
Oh, wow.
We're coming up on a moment here, too, where Famke, you guys start to realize that what's about to happen, and Xenia is downright giddy about it, like impressed, happy to be running into that.
Good old Xenia. She's definitely special.
They're all holding on. She's great here, where she says. It's a wonderful delivery there.
So impressed.
Yes,
yeah, she's very excited for this to happen, which is great. It
turns on like you can't believe. Model. All models, all this is models.
Did you guys bounce the camera for that shot with everything flying off the shelves?
Yeah,
and people...
we bounced it. And hurled everything everywhere, sort of pulled and. Because always trying to get that thing, it doesn't look like you've shaken the camera. What you want it to look like, of course, is the. Now, this is very interesting because I remember when we did this scene, Famke said to me, I haven't got much to do in this scene. And I remember saying to you, look, you just do, you'll be in character, you'll take the scene. Now, watch just her reactions, and she does. Just have a look at her reactions, even though she doesn't have a line to play.
And just in more amazing wardrobe back there too.
In more amazing wardrobe, yeah, she's great in this. Something about strawberries. I can't remember. I'm not hearing the soundtrack here, so.
No, me neither.
Yeah.
We don't really need to because I can.
So Famke, when you were in the background of this scene, I mean, just in terms of deciding what Xenia needs to be doing back there, like what were you thinking?
Bring up the scenery. I don't know. Making sure the camera's on. I just, to be honest with you, until Martin just said that, I did not remember that at all. I didn't remember.
Yeah, and then when we go to a
typical actor, I didn't have enough to do, but.
Yeah, but you do. See, the point is that you created such a strong character, and there is a close up coming up, but which she either sucks her finger. I can't remember what it is, but it's that's something. I think that's where Bond says, "Go on, shoot her."
I'm glad you brought that up. Actually, there's Eric Thorpe, who's watching on IGN's YouTube channel, had a question about whether or not you improvise the things that you're doing in the background of this scene. Eric says it's really fun and adds a lot to Xenia as a character.
It does.
So
that's my whole point.
You beat us to the question.
Pierce plays it very well.
Yeah.
She's always dressing him down.
And I love the don't just stand there. Like, what are you doing? Go.
And they do something. Yeah.
You know, that low angle shot of a helicopter coming up out of a train.
It's a real helicopter. It's not a model. It's actually the real.
That was
thing.
not a model.
No, it was not a model. It looks like a model.
We found one thing that was not a model.
Yeah. That would have been my guess for a model, but that's amazing.
No, what's a model without a proper helicopter? See, off it goes. That's the one.
There it goes.
Yeah. That wasn't. It could be a model, of course, obviously. And this is where he's twiddling the pen like crazy.
So in terms of setting up and paying off things like that, you do all of that in the storyboarding?
Yeah, I mean, I storyboard action. I never storyboard dialogue ever. All the action is storyboarded. This wasn't storyboarded at all, but the big action scenes I do storyboard. And the reason for doing that is because there's second unit shots and so forth, and they have to know what they're doing, if you see what I mean. So I do storyboard the action very carefully.
So in terms of the dialogue scenes, then, and you know, and Famke, for you, I mean, what do you prefer to have? You know, obviously, I would imagine that you do. Just more freedom on the day to be like, well, it would be nicer if I could walk over here on this line, and that sort of thing.
But that depends very much on the director that you work with, and to me, I'm a strong believer in it's a collaboration, and that's the beauty of filmmaking. It's a collaborative effort, and nobody should ever go into anything and set in their ways. I mean, that's the beauty of what can come out of it. When you work with somebody like Martin has very specific ideas about something, and then you bring something in, and then you come up with nobody had thought of. You know, together you do that as a whole, as a group. So,
sure,
yeah. But some sense of freedom. I've also worked with directors who are so incredibly restrictive in terms of where they want you to be, what they want you to do, and you still have to find your freedom within whatever little movement or action you are. I mean, action, but you know, of things that you can do. But Martin definitely wasn't like that.
And here they are getting together.
Yeah, even mid-kiss, he's still trying to get out a cheeky one-liner.
Well, a couple of them are real clunkers, the lines, of course. But I like to call it a homage to the previous Bonds and so forth. But you know,
what was it like? You know, on the day, if there's a one-liner like that just doesn't feel like it's working, or you know, when there's one that does really work. And Famke, you had one earlier about having to ventilate someone, you know, like those fun little double entendres that you know, action movies you got to have them. But like on the day while you're filming them, like what's it like, you know, working through those? Because that's not like, humans don't actually talk like that.
No, but when you're in a Bond movie, you need to have those. They're so
right.
Yeah, you do.
That it's in those moments, you know, straight up with a twist, and you know, all of those. The lines are just they're fun to play.
I have to say that in the sort of later Bond films, I do miss the humor. I've got to say.
Mm-hmm. I agree. I love the humor in this.
You know, and so this was all Puerto Rico. We're in now.
I've lost track of the number of locations at this point. It's
well, I mean, St. Petersburg was second unit. We obviously went to France. We shot there. Monte Carlo, we went there. London, and here we are in Puerto Rico. I think.
And where was the big satellite that you shot?
The what?
The big satellite. Where was that?
Yeah, that was Puerto Rico, and it's actually been the news lately because that it collapsed. That whole center thing, 500 feet above the satellite dish, which is 1,000 feet across, it actually collapsed. The wires broke, and the whole thing plunged into the.
They actually had a drone in the air looking at it while it happened too. You can see the
right.
footage of it
You can
falling.
see it. You
Incredible.
see it.
Wow.
Yeah. It was the biggest radio telescope in the world, 1,000 feet across. Yeah. That was the. This is the first time that BMW, of course, was unveiled. They used the movie to reveal it, if you see what I mean, to unveil it.
I was going to ask, I feel like this is probably the only Bond car that actually makes it back to Q Branch. Like, assuming that Joe Don Baker doesn't wreck it, it actually it comes out of the movie unscathed, which is kind of incredible.
Yeah, that was a pretty significant upgrade for him to land in this sort of like rickety plane and then get in that amazing car and just drive off.
Yeah, and go off. Actually, when we were filming it, we had helicopters above us with telephoto lenses, all trying to get a picture of the car because they kept it under wraps in trucks and things. And it was the first time it was revealed was in that scene.
This is an awesome shot right here.
It's slightly over. It's the wide shot's a bit over the top. It's a bit, but
it's very painterly.
A little sort of a little bit over the top is what I would. In fact, in Puerto Rico, we couldn't find a beach that was completely clean. That's an awful thing to say. So we had 100 people rake this beach and pick up all the rubbish, everything else. 100 people, literally in a line, picking up all the old plastic bottles, the Coke tins, the whole bit.
That was 25 years ago. Imagine now.
God almighty, yeah. So we now get the serious moment in Bond where she's giving him a raking over the coals.
I mean, I am a big fan of the consistent energy in this movie of like, cut it out, dude. Like, just do your, like, you know, I feel like every.
And then, of course, we have this is a little bit cliched, I hate to say it, the flames of passion. It's a bit much, but it's a bit OTT, I'm afraid.
It's very Bond 1960.
It's very Bond, I mean, come on, it's a huge
and especially
cliche.
Coming through that screen of what is that, the bed frame there too? Like
it's a chair there, but it's all a bit, it's all a bit 1996.
Yeah.
You know. There it is. And she comes up from behind. I remember she was annoyed she couldn't have a proper love scene. Well, you can't do that in Bond, so.
And keep the PG-13, right?
Yeah. Well,
you can kill a guy with your legs. Yeah, and you can blow everybody up.
Yeah.
Now, if Famke was having this scene, of course, if her character was having the scene, it really would have been interesting.
Yeah. That would not have made the cut.
God knows what you would have done.
I don't know.
I think the whole room would be on fire by the end.
Right.
Now, this is interesting. Look, this is Dominican Republic, okay? So, second unit on the wide shots here. There's a couple of interesting things here. We were looking for a lake in Puerto Rico. We couldn't find one. There are no lakes, right? So, and in Dominican Republic, we couldn't find this lake. So what you do is, this is obviously blue screen and so forth, intercut with the wide second unit shots, right? And the POVs and stuff. All this is second unit. Now this here, that's a model.
Oh.
That's a model. That's a model. And that plane is a little Airfix plane they pulled with a monofilament across the lake.
Oh, wow. So cool.
Isn't it unbelievable? I mean, this is Derek Muddings. They modeled it. And you'd never know.
Yeah.
You'd never know. That's a model. There it is, the little plane. This obviously was all model. All this nonsense is all models, of course.
Like to imagine, like the motorcycle earlier, just 7 takes of a whole plane crashing. And how
I know that was all model. This is we're back in the studio just for the last bit of it. This is all studio, of course.
So we're coming up here on Xenia's demise here in just a second, but that's obviously for a hench person in a Bond film, like that's obviously part of the deal is the needs a good death, right? Like how where does this rank for you? How did your Xenia's death play for you?
Compared to all my other deaths in movies, you mean?
Compared to all your other deaths, yeah. Top 10 Famke Janssen deaths.
It's the line that follows about, she always liked a good squeeze. Some awful kind of Bond line. That one of those cheeseball lines that we were talking about earlier.
But in terms of your last confrontation in terms of your last confrontation with Bond here and your exit from the movie, I guess. I mean, was it a good way to go for Xenia, do you think?
Well, I thought it's a great way, particularly is the way she deals with Bond, which we're going to see in a second as she comes down, right? It's sort of a very groggy Bond, right? And down she comes.
And so I had mentioned playing the video game a lot. Your character killed me so many times in that game. Like I'm
sorry.
It's okay. I did want to confront you about that. You have killed me a lot, but we both came out on the other side.
Brian's working through some personal stuff here. So.
Look at the way she plays this scene. Look at the way she plays this scene. God almighty.
I just licked his face.
I know you licked his face. It's all really good. Like she's really getting the rocks off on this. Look. I love this way she says, look. Headbutts her.
Wait till you turn the headbutt.
Wow.
That's also hooks you to a helicopter and shoots the helicopter.
And of course, what do? They go for lunch and they go, okay, that's lunch, and they leave me hanging in the tree as a joke.
What?
Did they really?
They did.
In the tree. It was a
How long did that joke play out for?
Too long. No, it wasn't
long.
We all left the lunch. Yes, goodbye. Yeah, so now we got all the control room stuff with big set, very big set.
I do think this is the most sort of Ken Adam like kind of classic Bond lair set. I mean, if nothing else, it's what it always is for me is the staircase that doesn't have railings.
Yes.
The floating stairs that do it for me.
Yes, I mean this is again models, but it's fairly obviously models and stuff. And again, that's a model.
You're giving away the movie magic.
Well, I think nowadays, of course, 25 years, I think we can give it away a bit. It's really just to show how good they were with models. This is all models, all of this. All that stuff you see being hauled up. I think the set was about 50 feet across. That's a model and them dropped in.
Famke, what was it like watching this movie for the first time, and then after your character, for being such a big presence in the movie, and then your character has died now in the movie, watching the rest of it for the first time?
Oh, I've never seen it. I've walked out.
You've never seen Premiere?
The moment he died, I left. No.
Good. That's what I was hoping you'd say.
It's a relief, to be honest with you, when you watch something, because I'm just not the kind of actor who likes to watch herself. So I could just sort of breathe and go, I'm done. I'm out, so I don't have to go like, when am I coming? Was it? Oh shit! What do I do? What, no. Now I really enjoyed it because I could just watch it without any anticipation or worry of what did I say and how did I say it and why did I, all the usual.
So this is the only real shot at the real place.
Oh, just that one shot of them running?
Yeah, and the rest of it is all model and just duplicated the whole thing. So I think the dish was about 50 feet across on the model.
I appreciate that, like, Boris is wearing like a Hawaiian shirt in this scene. It doesn't fit aesthetically with literally anything else, and I think that's the whole point. Like,
well, the whole point
everything's very industrial and brutalist.
His arrogance, because of he's the only one that can really make it.
There's a question from Eric Thorpe, who's watching on Cinefix. Who wants to know about a rumor that originally you guys wanted to keep Xenia alive for the next movie, but was there any sort of unofficial rule in the Bond franchise that you had to kill her off?
No, that's all rubbish. No, the point was we never ever discussed that. She always she dies. She's a villain, so she dies. But she would, of course, if she had gone on to begin, it would have been it would have worked. But we never discussed that.
Yeah.
It would have been fun to come back as Xenia on its obviously.
It would have been, yeah.
I think Xenia is right up there with Jaws. Like, there's no reason why she
certainly deserved to come back. I mean, there's no question about that because she's such a great character.
I mean, I've seen enough movies to know that you could technically still be alive up in that tree right now. I mean,
yes,
or at least have gotten down at some point.
Mm-hmm.
After lunch, you got out of the tree.
Exactly.
Found
helicopter didn't crash on you.
Found unconscious by a sort of lost tribe in the middle of the jungles of.
Becomes their queen. There's another question from a user named Bean Marine on Cinefix. Wants to know, Famke, would you want to come back to the Bond franchise? Or even in a Joe Don Baker kind of way, you can play somebody different.
Yes, with a different tattoo. No Muffy on my stomach. But no, I mean
I'd be all for that. I think that'd be awesome.
It's unbelievable what they've done. I really think it's incredible. I take my hat off to them. This is, to have something last for almost 6 decades. It's unheard of.
I know. Well, it's the greatest franchise in the world, to be honest. I think, in terms of longevity,
and going with the times and coming up with different ways to keep it fresh and interesting and still in keeping with what the Bond franchise is all about. That's pretty clever.
Yeah. And Martin, between GoldenEye and Casino Royale, you were able to sort of kind of reboot the franchise twice. Can you talk about what sort of the different challenges were in working on this one with Pierce and then on Casino Royale with Daniel Craig?
Well, because of the gap, the 7-year gap or 6-year gap, whatever it was, it wasn't so much just rebooting and so forth. It was just thinking, well, it's a Bond film. Let's pull it into the 90s. Let's sort of make it our own, basically, which is what we did. But it was not so much a reboot as an extension of, now we had Pierce and so forth. It was 7 years later. We had to, we were very much aware of a lot of people did ask whether, as I said earlier, that should we reboot this thing? Is it past its sell-by date? So that was the challenge. Casino Royale was different. The thing was that the previous Bond, I get a bit mixed up with the titles, Die Another Day, was it? I think with invisible cars, with ice palaces and snowboarding off kind of ice flows and so forth. It was too much. I think it just got to the point of it was starting to lose it, as it were. And the producers knew it too. They just felt it had just gone too far, and they had to do something to pull it back. And they had the rights to Casino Royale, so we all went into that saying we have to completely reboot this thing. We have to bring it back to earth, and really make it grittier, tougher, make a tougher Bond, much more like the books. And if you read the book, Craig is much more like the original Bond character, much more serious, and a darker Bond. So, and the great thing is, in Casino, of course, we had a love story, which was a genuine love story. So, which is something that Bond doesn't really have in any other movie except on Her Majesty's Secret Service, where he gges married to Diana Rigg, I think, in that movie. So that was the thinking at the time.
Was there a window where Pierce Brosnan was still attached to Casino Royale? Were you ever developing Casino Royale with Pierce Brosnan?
No, I think what happened was simply they wanted to do something else to start with. They only got the rights to Casino very late in the piece because it was owned by, I think, Columbia Pictures, who made a dreadful movie of it in 1967 with 5 people appearing as Bond. It was a kind of comedy, but, you know, to be honest, you couldn't call it that when you see it, but the rights were with Columbia. They managed to get the rights. I think they were planning to do a different film, and then suddenly, why don't we need to reboot this? Let's go back to basics. Let's go back to, they got the rights to Casino, and I think a lot of people bid for it, right? Tarantino was one of them who actually bid for the rights to it. They got it, and they decided that, look, we have to rethink this. So, to be honest, it's almost a prequel to all the Bonds, despite the fact that Judi Dench appears in Casino. She's probably aged about 210 now, if you work out the timeline and so forth. But no, there was a very distinct move to bring Bond back to Earth on Casino.
Yeah, I do like to. It's fun, and I did a piece, a video timeline about, like, is it possible to rearrange the entire Bond chronology into an order that makes sense with all the characters and all the recastings as though he's one guy the whole time? And it's silly, and you need to ignore a lot of things, but you can do it.
I'm sure you can, yeah. I'm sure you can. But the over a period of time, I mean, Connery was wonderful. You obviously had Roger Moore, who was brought his own kind of, and the humor in the Roger Moore. There was some very funny scenes in those movies, I tell you. And Roger had his own sort of special quality that he brought to those. Then, of course, we had in between that, of course, we had Lazenby doing the one movie, and then Tim Dalton came through, and actually Pierce was supposed to do those movies, but as you know, because of his TV commitments, they wouldn't let him out of his contract, so Dalton got the part. And subsequently, of course, Pierce came back once he had finished his TV stuff. The Dalton thing had happened. The legal problems created a gap in the production of the movies. So all of this you see there on the screen, the usual blowings up and, you know.
The usual blowings up.
Always control blow up in every Bond film. Running. And, you know what I mean? This is all the...
This scene actually inspired, not to keep bringing up the video game, but I know our audience is big fans of it, inspired one of the most sort of difficult levels in the entire game, because it turns into this giant escort mission between the two characters, which notoriously became one of the most like sort of difficult escort missions in any video game, because you're constantly keeping this character from exploding, and it doesn't go so well for most players.
Yes,
There's a handful of questions.
Go
I'm
ahead.
sorry, go ahead.
No.
I was just
going to say that
there's a handful. You go.
The that's the real thing there, and of course the intercut between set and the real thing. The second unit went out on that thing. That bridge is so scary. You're 500 feet above, and it's very rusty. And it's if you get any sense of vertigo, you won't go near it. But the intercutting between them, between studio and the real thing, works very well. But that took a lot of planning.
That sounds terrifying.
Sorry, go ahead, Clint.
No, I was just going to say there's been a handful of questions from the audience about whether or not one of them was let's see, I'll track down one of their names, but it was Bean Marine again was one of them that asked if you'd ever played the video game. Just for and for a lot of people in our audience too, the video game was their way into the movie instead of vice versa, maybe. But
yeah, I'm sad to say no. I don't play video games, which is. But my wife plays it, right? And probably my sister-in-law plays it. I'm not sure, but a lot of people play it. Certainly her husband does. He's a big video game player. And it was a huge success too, the video game. I wish God they gave me 1% of that. I'd be very happy. Yeah. Now this is the real thing you see there. That's studio, real thing, studio, real thing, studio.
Ooh.
Studio, real thing.
I do love making sure you get the close up of him landing, like Pierce actually landing with the thud kind of at the bottom of those steps. It makes the previous shot diving down the steps that much more impactful.
He's very good at action, Pierce. You know, he's excellent at being able to sell that stuff. Reaction is much more important than the action sometimes, you know, in selling something.
Yeah, you got to sell a bunch, right?
Yeah, exactly. So
and here's an interesting thing too. We're in this big, incredible villains lair set, and then running across this giant antenna, and then the big chunk of the fight scene between Bond and the main villain is in this dirty old shack, which I think is a really cool kind of like it. Well, it's a intimate affair.
Yeah, the reason for that was it was trying to be honest, to emulate the famous fight in From Russia with Love in a confined space, you know, which really set the railway carriage scene between Robert Shaw and Connery is fantastic, and there's no room to fight really. And so this was the idea. It's a little bit bigger, of course, but it was to make a very vicious kind of tough fight. And it's a very good fight too, this.
To me, this sort of sets the roots for a lot of the stuff we saw in the Daniel Craig Bond movies, in that they are sort of very kind of grounded, very close, confrontational. And I love that, especially within the context, the stakes of the scene being set, you know, on this gigantic, almost fantastical structure, you know, hanging over the ground like that. To cut in on such a close, intimate fight scene between two people is super cool.
Yeah, that was the idea. It was to really belt the hell out of one another and hurl, you know, and it works very well. I mean, and of course, there's always a trapdoor to drop through in Bond, as you know. Always.
Especially because at this point we've seen Pierce Brosnan's Bond drop into a toilet. We've seen him drop into an elevator.
It's just live dropping.
And
here we go. Here we go.
This was always very
known as
extremely Luke
Bond.
Skywalker to me. This has always been very Luke Skywalker, Empire Strikes Back, right here.
Climbing up the old ladder. Here we go. And of course, every facility has to explode in a Bond film, as you know.
It's the rule.
It's all part of course. Yeah, I know. So down he goes. Boom, bam, bam. Oh, God. Actually, that set was at a 45-degree angle, just so you know, to sort of... It would have been almost impossible to do it vertically, and cheated with the camera. But...
Mm-hmm.
And here's another moment of, you know, a bunch of really violent action, and then just this quiet little moment before he actually stomps on them.
And
As he's letting the knife twist.
Now, I had problem with the sensors on this fight at the end of the needle here, and headbutts were not allowed, so we had to pull back on this. It was slightly more vicious, the whole thing, but the sensors got we had
so
to make
my
cuts.
headbutt her was allowed, but this one...
No, your headbutt was allowed. You know, but this is...
So it's just a certain and over.
I mean, she also shot 2 people. That's like...
Indeed.
It's really funny how it's so strange how it works.
Yeah, and what we did do here, which is interesting, is we had an impact shot for 006, right? Which is very unusual in Bond. It was a little bit vicious, but if you watch him sort of there, right? Bam. Ooh. Yeah.
Yeah.
That was allowed.
Well, that's fine, but a headbutt is not.
You're not allowed blood. So when he's lying there, you are not allowed blood. They won't allow you.
But what about the blood on it? What about the blood on his face? He had blood on it.
A little bit of that, but you can't have anything from the head. That's why it's and this is funny. When he leaped on the helicopter here, the stuntman missed. The helicopter was there. Yes, Simon Crane jumped and he missed it. And it was our last day of shooting. And we had to shoot in the sun to match. And we had 45 seconds of sun just before lunch. So we had to go. So we rolled it and he jumped and he missed it.
Yeah, to hide it with looking down at Pierce.
If you look at the close-up of the hands hitting, that got us out of problems. But, you know.
Yeah.
This "I am invincible" line is one of the, like, my friends and I would say this all the time.
Yeah, I am invincible.
I'm invincible. Then he blows up.
And he freezes to death.
Oh, that's right. Yeah, he gets this horrible chemical bath. This is almost like Batman villain death over here. I love it.
And so this is where you notice he talks about the plants and the banyan trees and things, you know, and it really was, you know, I had to tighten it. And so kind of establishing what that was about, we lost, unfortunately, but I think it was better for the movie.
I also think it's great here because ultimately Jodan Baker gets the quip at the end where normally Bond, you know, in Moonraker, you know, it's either Bond or the girl that gets to say, "Take me around the world one more time, James," or you know, that sort of thing. But it's actually Jodan Baker gets the, you want to continue debriefing each other.
Yeah.
Yeah, he pretty comfortably and confidently bobs and weaves in and out of this film at his own pace, which I really love.
Yes, he does. Yeah. And off he goes, and of course,
walk off camera.
As the helicopters take it, we come up with this cheesy song right at the end. Well, I'm not going to comment beyond that. However,
okay.
Fortunately, the end credits start to come up So we're at least looking at the credits. So there you have it.
Yeah, the credits starting to roll now. Well, guys, thank you so much for watching this with us. We've got a few more sort of general questions that if you don't mind hanging out for a second. The first question, and Martin, you kind of touched on some of this stuff, talking about how great the producers are. But this question is for both of you, and Famke, maybe you can answer first. But how is it being accepted into the Bond creative team? These producers who have been working on the films for decades. How is it joining the franchise?
Absolutely amazing. I mean, I wouldn't be sitting here today in my wonderful, beautiful penthouse in New York City if it hadn't been for this opportunity. That really changed everything. Up until then, I had been a struggling actor and tried to get parts here and there. I'd done one movie for United Artists leading up to that, and another small indie, and some little things here and there. But the leap of faith they took with me, and the fact that opened so many doors. And then, of course, from that moment on, you have to really fight hard to go against type casting and all of it, because I'm not Russian and I'm not some crazy assassin, and all the things that came with it. Like, oh no, I have to fight against that. But it opened so many doors. So I am nothing but grateful for this incredible experience, the leap of faith that Martin, you took with me, and Barbara, Michael, and everybody. So yeah, nothing but gratitude.
Yeah, great. And then this is for both of you, from Kratos70, who's watching on IGN's YouTube. What was the most memorable moment making GoldenEye? Martin, we can start with you.
For me? Yeah, I'm just trying to think what is memorable. Well, it's all pretty memorable for me because it was a first Bond film. My previous film was a kind of a B feature called No Escape with Ray Liotta. And we shot that in Australia, and the film didn't do anything at the box office, but I got Bond on the back of that movie, right? So it was, and when I was asked to do it and so forth, I was so kind of taken aback. Probably because I was cheap. I mean, that was probably why they got me. But for me, it's all memorable. It's difficult to know, what are the most memorable moments. I do find filming very tough. I find it, very, what's the word? It's tough filmmaking. The pressure of the budget, the pressure of getting it all through, and so forth. But the
Nope.
We lost him.
I think you muted yourself somehow.
Okay,
he's
how's
leaning
that?
forward on
Yeah, so Pierce was terrific. Obviously, the girls, Famke and Isabella, were fantastic. We had a great cast, which made a hell of a difference. Everybody, I think, got on well. And again, as Famke knows, the Barbara, very protective about the actresses, and the producers are, they give you a lot of leeway to do. They let you go and do what you've got to do, and that's a credit, because let me tell you, we've all worked in this industry. We know we worked with some people, frankly, that we could strangle, but these two are fantastic. And so for me, I'm just trying to think if there's any one scene that I actually really thoroughly enjoyed doing. I love the action scene with the tank, all that stuff. I love doing all of that. The run up to that, where they escape and so forth, I thought was terrific.
Right.
No, I think I would just say the whole thing. Really, nothing particularly.
Yeah, I can imagine
say that I love
getting the gig in the first place was.
Yeah, was a kick. Yeah. Let me tell you. Why me?
Famke, anything stand out for you?
That's a tough one. I really felt the pressure of every single scene. Every moment had to be so good that each one of them had brought so much. Being in the casino with Piers, where he's Bond. How iconic! Like in that moment, and the spa scene, and But yeah, it's such an outrageous character that it wasn't like, oh, I didn't do anything for 20 scenes and then I did one outrageous things in one scene. No, I was just outrageous from beginning to end. So it was kind of memorable for me playing this character every day, going to set, going like, I can do this, I can do this. Just being really shy. And I remember that when we were filming that scene with the Admiral in the beginning where I'm in bed with him, that's pretty over the top kind of crazy sort of sex scene with me strangling him with my thighs and whatever. And they had built up the stage really high on stilts. And, I had like a clause in my contract where it had, only so many people out on set. It was a closed set, and we had these sort of curtains but when I looked over and I'm sitting there in my corset with barely anything on, and I'm looking down to the stage, and all these guys, all the crew guys are sitting there with their sandwiches, like staring up at me with the curtain this far apart. And I'm like, okay, so much for I was like, whatever. Millions of people see this, so what difference does it really make,
They just had to bring their sandwiches too. That's just
yeah.
Yeah, a lunchbox.
It was memorable. Really from beginning to end. It was, it wasn't. It was a big deal for all of us. There was a lot of pressure on for Martin and for Barbara and for Michael, especially for Pierce. Less so for me because nobody knew who I was, and but it was after a 6-year hiatus and all the issues that had, like, can we bring Bond back and all of that. So I think it was a heightened set to be on. Nothing was taken like, not that it mostly is pretty heightened, I think, but don't you think, Martin, this was particularly, there was just a lot of pressure on it, I think, everyone.
Yeah, there was. And the pressure was really about whether the film would succeed or not, certainly from my point of view. But you make these things, you don't really think about it too much. You just go for it, and you just do the best job possible, and you hope it's going to work out at the end. And there's a hell of a lot of pressure from all the fans. Famke said earlier, British press are they're insidious about the talk about this, and I remember there were press reports about Pierce not being able to drive a stick shift and all sorts of nonsense and so forth, that all this garbage that sort of comes out from the press, most of it lies and innuendo and stuff like that. So there was a lot of pressure from that perspective. But ironically, when you do it, when you're actually working on it, and I think it's for the actors as well, you're really in a capsule. You just, there's the scenes, you make the best you can. You're gonna make it look as terrific as you can, and so you, what's the word? You cocoon yourself away from all those outside pressures. I remember. Even Casino Royale, when Daniel Craig was heavily criticized before he even got near a camera or saw the set, people were saying this is ridiculous. A blonde Bond. He looked like President Putin. I had all this stuff used to come up. And I remember saying to Daniel once, I said, do you listen to all this shit, from, right? And I said, do you listen to this bullshit that comes out? He said, yeah, every bit of it. He says, because I come on set, I know everybody else has read it, so why the hell shouldn't I? So it was great. Yeah.
Right.
Anyway, that was.
I love the idea of people being worried that Pierce Brosnan couldn't drive stick shift when he begins the movie by bungee jumping. It's like,
I know.
Right.
Where do they get this stuff from?
We're bound to be able to find an automatic, so long as he can bungee jump. Bond will be fine.
Next comes very easily to people, I've noticed.
Right.
Saying something positive on most people's
Yeah. Well, guys, again, I had a fantastic time watching this movie with you. Thank you so much for joining us, and all the pressure, whatever pressure you felt back then, you nailed it, because we're still here. We're still here talking about it because it's one that really, really stands out in the entirety of the franchise. So, thank you again for being here.
And thank you, and thank the audience for listening to us. And Famke, we'll see each other at some point, darling. Right.
Yeah.
All right.
That would be
And so lovely to see you now. And I know you probably you've been with Liam a lot, so I'll tell him
yeah,
we
give him
said
my
hi.
love. Wonderful.
All right, darling. Okay, guys. Thanks very much
Thank
indeed.
you, everybody.
Appreciate it.
We'll see you next
Bye,
time
guys.
on Let's Film
Thank you all
Theater.
so much for watching.
Bye, everyone.
All right, guys. Bye.